Hey everyone, it's Daniel, and this is day 28 of my 30-day video challenge. And the topic of today's video is going to be attachment psychology, attachment theory. So, first of all, what is attachment theory? What is attachment psychology? This is a field of study that kind of emerged, there were precursors, but it emerged in the 1960s with a psychologist named John Bowlby. And he was studying, the first study on attachment theory was really with little kids, but the gist of attachment theory is looking to provide a model for people's adult behavior, specifically how they behave in romantic, intimate, close relationships, and some of the dynamics between partners that can cause a tremendous amount of pain and suffering. So there's a great book kind of overviewing some of the theory and treatment for attachment disorders, for attachment problems. It's called The Human Magnet Syndrome by Ross Rosenberg. And the catchphrase to know if you're caught up in an attachment issue, an attachment complex, is that you keep dating the same person. So the catchphrase is same person, different face. And so if you find yourself getting into a relationship and then realizing it's exactly the same pathological relationship that you just got out of, this might be a sign that you're dealing with an attachment issue. And the root of the attachment issue, the cause of the attachment issue, is actually something that happened, or something that happened multiple times, a pattern that happened in early childhood development. Probably like before the age of 6 years old is when the attachment style really crystallizes in individuals. So how can you develop an attachment problem? An attachment problem has to do probably with your primary caretaker and how that caretaker interacted with you, how that caretaker perceived you and treated you, and therefore imprinted on you kind of your early first impressions, or the precursor to your ego, or your sense of clearly defined self-agency. So early in childhood, if your mother or your primary caretaker is abusive or somehow doesn't recognize one of your human needs and fails to meet that need for you because you're hopeless, as a baby, you start to take on the self-image of there must be something wrong with me, right? So as kids, as children, we always make this compromise because psychologically speaking, the parents, the caretakers, are kind of like gods, like these super powerful forces, and we're so in love with our parents that we tend to come up with a compromise for why that need isn't getting met. And the compromise is there must be something wrong with me, right? Parents are perfect, and I have this need. I need attention, I need shelter, I need protection, I need safety, but I'm not getting that need met. I'm not getting that need met. So there must be something wrong with me. I must be a bad kid, and I will develop a self-image and a series of adaptive strategies that incorporate this. Like, I love my parent, and I can't get my need met from the parent. The parent is right, therefore I'm wrong. Therefore I need to have this need met in some hidden or unconscious or unsavory way. So we start to develop these strategies for getting our needs met, despite the fact that we feel guilty for having them. We feel ashamed. We feel like we shouldn't have these needs, or even in the broadest sense, like maybe we think that having needs is wrong. Like we shouldn't even have needs at all. And so these can, this is kind of the root of the attachment issue. So if any of what I'm saying resonates with you, uh, early childhood, not getting a specific need met, kind of evolving or adapting a strategy to have that need met, but we feel shame or guilt about it. This is all in the attachment complex. So what happens from there is basically, if you're not conscious of this, if you haven't healed the attachment wound, what's going to happen is you're going to grow up and you're going to find a partner, or you're going to find a mate, you're going to find a relationship, and basically that relationship is going to follow the exact same dynamic. So perhaps, just as an example, your need for safety as a child wasn't met, and therefore you're kind of traumatized, you're a little agitated, and you're always perceiving other people as being a source of danger. Other people are not safe. However, you're a human and you still have needs, you still have desires, you still want to be close to a person. And so inevitably what you're going to do is you'll probably end up with someone who makes you feel unsafe in the exact ways that your primary caretaker made you feel unsafe. Now, why the hell would a person do that? Because the known unsafety, the predictable unsafety, the kind of unsafety or the kind of not getting my need met that I'm most comfortable with, I'm most used to, I'm most conditioned, is that early childhood situation. So this is it sounds crazy, it sounds counterintuitive, and you wouldn't believe that a fully walking conscious adult would do this, but more often than not they do. I'm telling you, this is the rule rather than the exception. But people will tend to enter into a relationship in their adult life that mimics almost identically the attachment style that they were most used to, even when that attachment dynamic is toxic. Even if the other person is abusive, it's that abusive dynamic that you're most comfortable with, and therefore you put yourself into that situation over and over again. So yeah, back to the catchphrase, same person, different face. Same personality, different face. It's like, why do I always keep falling in love or becoming attracted to people that hurt me? And this is the answer from attachment theory, the answer that this particular model provides is, it's all your parents' fault, basically. I'm kidding. But the start, I won't say the cause, but this pattern started in early childhood, and it works its way up to adulthood because we reinforce those neural circuits, right? We tend to get in relationships that reinforce the lack of safety or the lack of understanding and attunement, whatever it is that we were missing in childhood. We tend to repeat that because it's comfortable, and then we start reinforcing those circuits, and then we build up this whole self-view and worldview where basically this is the only thing that could possibly happen. This is the way that people are, and that's where it starts to get unhealthy, because for a normally attached person, or a person who has kind of gone through the work of analyzing their attachment style and working on it, if you're smart about it, if you're diligent about it, you will find that there are people out there who don't treat you as badly as the dynamic that you're caught up in. There are people that will that don't fit the pattern. And if we can start to tune our awareness slightly by becoming conscious of these patterns and then looking for exceptions, we might start to notice, hey, that person's pretty cool. I want to be friends with them because they are not in any way part of this psychodrama. They're not part of this pattern that I keep repeating. This person might actually be really healthy for me because they do make me feel safe, or they do make me feel understood, seen, attuned. So yeah, the early attachment styles can have a profound impact on your life, specifically in the way that you relate to people I won't say of the opposite sex, but people who activate that part of your brain which makes you either attracted or not attracted to the person. So oftentimes this is a pattern of behavior that pops up in romantic or very close relationships, but it can happen in relationships that are like friendships as well. So so we'll talk a little bit about the different attachment styles. There's of course like the normal, what does that mean? Healthy attached person who their relationships are perfect and they don't have any problems. So this category may be hypothetical. I have never met anyone who was fully healthy and secure. However, we'll just use it as an ideal, as a construct, and say that this is what we would be, kind of aiming towards. But the how does attachment go wrong? And what happens then? There's kind of two bad forms of attachment, two pathological forms of attachment. The first one is, well, in no particular order, but the first one is an anxious attachment style. So anxious attachment style is, we'll talk about kind of the symptoms, if you will, and how this pops up, how this manifests itself in a relationship, because that's where you start to notice that you might have an attachment problem, is when you start getting this friction in relationships, particularly intimate or romantic relationships. But the first attachment problem or issue is an anxious attachment. And people who are anxiously attached basically find themselves kind of ruminating and obsessing over the relationship. The reason that they are obsessing and ruminating over the relationship is because they're never really sure about it. They're kind of thinking in the back of their heads, like, well, this person has been nice to me for 8 years, but tomorrow they could flip the switch, and so I need to keep checking. And so an anxious person will constantly be checking on the relationship, making sure everything's okay. And when things aren't going okay, when there's an argument, the person who's anxious about the relationship will get very defensive. They'll take a minor criticism and blow it out of proportions, or take it super personally, or even if it's like a minor thing, like, hey, I wish you had not left your coffee cup on the table but took it to the sink and rinsed it instead. Like a very clear request of like, hey, you did this thing, but I would have rather that you did that thing. This is the reason why. This is how it made me feel. Even with all this clear explanation and like a rational argument from the other partner, the person who's anxious will take this personally, and they'll say, well, does that mean you don't like me? Like, they start worrying immediately about the condition of the relationship, even after the smallest infraction. So this is like an anxious attachment style. And trying to think like what else would an anxious person do, but that's pretty much the common pattern, is this obsession with the relationship. Perhaps a clinginess, a neediness, like wanting to bring this person closer all the time, maybe even despite the fact that this other person would prefer some space, right? Even that is considered reason enough for the anxious person to question the quality of the relationship. So that's kind of the anxious attachment style. Now the other unhealthy form of attachment can be called avoidant. And an avoidant person is also concerned with the quality of the relationship, but their overall impression of the relationship is usually that no matter what they do, their need will not get met. And so the best thing to do is to avoid. So whenever there's a conflict, an avoidant person will probably not instigate that argument. they will tend to hold things back. They will tend to not say anything even when something should be said. Like even if I wanted you to take your coffee cup and take it to the sink and wash it instead of leaving it out, I wouldn't say anything if I was an avoidant person. I would just bottle it up inside, and I would be angry. I would be resentful because I'm not getting my need met, right? I need this house to be ordered, and I need whatever it is. I need coffee cups to be in their specific locations. But I'm not getting my need met, but I'm avoiding it. I can't tell you about it. I can't say anything. I don't want to start a fight. Or maybe I'm afraid that expressing my needs is not okay, right? That my purpose in the relationship is to serve, is to meet the other person's needs, but I'm a little ashamed of the fact that I have needs myself. So there's all kinds of reasons for each one of these attachment styles, but you can see each one kind of, well, they're almost perfect complements of one another. And in this book, the human magnet syndrome, the human magnet syndrome is that people on both sides of the spectrum, anxious and avoidant, will tend to become attracted to each other. And the reason they become attracted to each other is because the other person is able to fulfill a need of theirs that they cannot on their own satisfy. And it works out to this perfectly complementary relationship where you both get to be avoidant and anxious and terrorize each other and be miserable, and then the relationship will explode eventually. But in the meantime, in some weird, sick, twisted way, you were managing to get your needs met, at least at a minimal level. So naturally you're attracted to this person. And you can think about this stuff and see if any of this applies in your own life. Like, do you find yourself avoiding more often, or do you find yourself ruminating and becoming anxious about the quality of your relationships? Another thing I've heard about anxious attachment is that, especially now in modern times, now that we have email and text, like these instant forms of communication, a typical anxious thing to do would be to, send a text that says, I don't know, I love you. And then when the person hasn't responded in 2 minutes, you just, you assume it's over. You assume the absolute worst. They must be out cheating on me, or, they hate me, or, they found someone else. So, so we've talked about the two main attachment problems, the attachment issues. There's also kind of a third one, which is understood to be basically a combination of anxious and avoidant, and they call this disorganized attachment. And that's just, the person is manifesting avoidant behaviors in some situations and anxious behaviors in another situation. And I think it comes down to diagnostics. It basically just means that whatever psychologist this person happens to be sitting in front of, based on the interview or based on the series of interviews, we couldn't exactly pin down which one it was, but it's definitely some attachment issue. Maybe it's a little of both, but it certainly qualifies as an attachment disorder. So we'll call it disorganized. Just one kind of interesting fact is, which I learned from Daniel P. Brown, who is a Harvard professor and also, a bit of an expert. Well, he wrote a textbook on attachment theory. Is that people who go seek therapy for complex trauma. So this is not just a one-time incident. You were like raped or attacked or something at a specific time. Complex trauma, on the other hand, is like a repeated pattern of trauma. Again, usually in early or middle childhood. People who seek therapy for complex trauma seem to make huge improvements when they're treated with this attachment model. So, and if you think about it for 5 minutes, it makes a lot of sense why early childhood trauma could lead to an attachment disorder, and then obviously how the treatments designed for attachment disorders could aid in that. But the cool finding, the kind of the revolutionary or groundbreaking finding from Daniel P. Brown was that these people who have complex trauma, they actually improve more if you treat them from this attachment paradigm. If you actually just treat the underlying attachment condition instead of the classical trauma treatment, which would just be trauma processing, like bringing up that specific incident, bringing that memory into consciousness and analyzing what happened, and understanding that at a deep level. That's great, but people with complex trauma still have attachment issues. They still don't have a fully healthy strategy for relating to other people. So even though they understand their trauma, they're still likely to get caught in that pattern and find a relationship where they get abused again because they haven't actually worked out the attachment trauma or the attachment problem. So, okay, how do we resolve or how do we heal an attachment issue? This is the $1 million question, right? If some of this has resonated, you've probably been wondering, what do I do about it? According to Daniel P. Brown, there are 3 pillars of healthy attachment, or 3 pillars of treating an attachment disorder. And let's see if I can do these in a specific order this time. The first one is metacognitive skills. So it turns out that a lot of people with attachment problems, attachment disorders, because of the very nature of the disorder and how it started in early childhood and how it affects their image of themselves, and you kind of build up this ego identity around guilt and shame. An effective tool for kind of getting down to the meat of this is metacognitive skills, like actually working with the person and teaching them how to see themselves properly, how to see themselves clearly, how to see themselves like other people see them, right? Because the person with an attachment trauma is kind of like bundled up inside going like, I'm a person of little worth, my needs don't matter, no one loves me, all that stuff. So teaching the person the proper metacognitive skills to analyze, like, are these statements really true? Am I really a worthless person? Because of course, if you're thinking metacognitively clearly, 99.9% of people will not draw the conclusion that, yes, I'm a terrible person and it's perfectly okay that no one loves me, right? I mean, for most people, that's just a fallacy. It's complete bullshit. But teaching a person the metacognitive skills to realize that for themselves seems to be really really useful. Critical, actually, to the journey. The second pillar of this attachment healing is what's called the ideal parent protocol. And it's basically piggybacking off of some Tibetan Buddhist psychology, namely the discovery, application of your ability to visualize. And we've actually found this to be true in modern scientific literature, that basically by visualizing something in a different way, you can actually change your emotional response, and you can even change your thoughts about something. Trying to think of a specific example or a specific study, and nothing is coming to my mind here. However, I do this all the time in meditation class, and we just visualize, okay, you're anxious, you're stressed, you're afraid. Just imagine, close your eyes and just imagine that you were in a safe place and you're in a room full of pillows, and you're surrounded by people who love you, and people who are cheering you on and want nothing but the best for you. If you just visualize that, your body starts to relax and your emotional system starts to take the cues as if it were true. Now, of course, this is terrifying, because I'm basically saying if you visualize something, you can convince yourself that it's true. Although I would say it's a little more subtle than that. It's hard to actually convince yourself of something that isn't true merely by visualizing it. But in this case, the alternative that we are imagining is just as true, perhaps more true than our current worldview, the thing that we're believing now, which is that I'm insufficient, I'm not worthy of love, no one understands me, things like this. The opposite of all of those is just as true. There are people that love me. Well, yeah, that's true. There is someone out there that understands me. Yeah, that's probably true, right? So we just start entertaining these options. And the way that the ideal parent protocol works is going back to this early childhood incident or series of incidents that left you without your needs being met. What we're doing is we're using that giant visual cortex that we have, and we're imagining a different set of parents, like our godparents or our spiritual parents. This alternate set of parents is actually a common mythological motif, like Harry Potter. What was that show on Nickelodeon about the Fairly Odd Parents? Like this idea of having celestial or godly parents is kind of what we're hijacking here, or we're borrowing that idea from religious mythology, and we're actually using it to reprogram our emotional response with regards to how we relate to other people. And just like any meditation, if you practice this for 10 or 15 minutes a day, you'll find out that the attitude, the energy of that meditation or that visualization carries itself out into your life. So you spend 15 or 20 minutes imagining these two alternate parents, and they give you everything that you need. They give you love and attunement and safety, and they foster your unique sense of self, and they protect you. And you go through this visualization and you feel it in your body. You feel like, what would it feel like if I really knew that there was someone out there, these ideal parents, right now it's fictional, but what would it feel like in my body if I just knew down to the core that I was actually safe? We can start to reprogram ourselves. And then we go out into the world and we start to find out that this new story, like, oh, I am safe, is just as true as the other story. Oh, I'm not safe. And at that point we can make a decision. Do we want to live the life of a person who is bottled up and unsafe and misunderstood and not worthy of love? Or do we want to go out into the world with the attitude that we are worthy of love and there are people that understand, and we can find our community, and we can do this. We can be a person who is loved, who is worthy. So we're just using this visualization to kind of prime those circuits, and then we go out into the world and we start actually building those connections. We find people who satisfy our attachment needs, and then we get into a positively reinforcing circuit instead of this old one where we kept seeking out the relationship that was going to destroy and terrorize us, and therefore validating that point of view, right? So pillar 2, ideal parent protocol. Pillar 3, which is kind of a natural, this is where all this is going, but pillar 3 is getting the person with the attachment issue, which is everyone, engaged with collaborative behavior. So you want to actively seek out, use your best judgment, and find people, find a community, find a person, find a relationship, find a partner, find someone who you can tell the truth to and who you can work on this stuff with, and someone who you think or know is going to meet your attachment needs. So whatever it is, that thing that you didn't get when you were a kid, you want to find someone who's able to give that to you, someone that knows about the kind of, you have to explain this pattern to them. Basically, you have to have the kind of relationship where you can tell the person, like, hey, my weakness is that I have this avoidant thing. And this is how it works. When we get in an argument and you start yelling at me, I'm going to want to avoid you. I'm going to want to run away. And I'm just, it takes two people, because when you're in a heightened emotional state, you are reacting, not responding. So you're probably going to revert back to your attachment style, and you're going to react in that way. That's the automatic pattern that you've been practicing for literally your entire life. So making the other person aware of it, not making them, but having two people aware of it, then when you start doing it, they can point it out to you. And it's actually through the relationship with this other person that you can tell the truth to, who knows about this pattern in you, that you can slowly start to almost pull yourself up by your bootstraps, inch by inch by inch. You can start to take the edge off of this thing that would normally destroy a relationship. But now you've brought it out into the open. You've told the person, like, hey, this is the pattern. This is what I'm trying to overcome. And then, of course, you have to be willing and open to change. When the person does say, hey, you're doing that thing, you're being anxious and it's, bugging the hell out of me. You have to be you have to trust them enough to take them at their word and say, I didn't think I was doing that, but now that you're telling me, there might be something to it. And now, this person is reflecting back to you aspects of your own behavior that are involved with this pattern. So now you have more information. So between the metacognitive training, like learning how to accurately reflect upon your own thoughts and determine how true they are, the ideal parent protocol, like visualizing what it would be like to have secure attachment, or just feeling what would it be like to be the kind of person who is healthy, has a healthy attachment and has strong relationships, and then actually going out and forging one or more relationships. That collaborative behavior. One thing I will say about this collaborative behavior is that probably where it starts is with one person. You just need to find one person who you can explain all of this to. You can tell them the truth, and this person is willing to work with you a little bit. If it sounds totally crazy, you're like, I don't know a goddamn person on planet Earth that is capable, willing, or, wanting to do anything like that. I promise you there are people out there. This can work with a therapist, but because you only see a therapist for like 1 hour a week, it can be slow progress. The best way to do this is in a real world relationship, basically, because that's where the attachment pattern kind of bubbles up. It's like through the interaction with other people. It's like the problem is in the space in between, right? And so it's when you start to mesh with another person that problem area starts to become apparent. So usually the way in is like you found a relationship with someone who knows about your attachment style, they're willing to work with you, they love you, they're patient, they're understanding, they can have conversations about these things, and then something goes wrong. You have there's some friction, there's some tension, there's an incident. That's when the real work starts, because then the person can start to tell you, like, hey, you're doing it right now. And that's when you need to work on that metacognition. That's when you need to realize, like, oh, I'm in this situation acting as if you're my caretaker and you're not treating me like, you're not keeping me safe, but actually I am safe, and you're not really doing that. I'm just reacting in that way. So it's like in the moment, in the argument, in the middle of the thick of it, that's when the work happens. That's, you start self-reflecting, you start noticing the pattern when it's happening, and then you start coming up with new strategies. You're like, well, what if instead of avoiding this for the next 6 months, what if we just talk about it? What if we just come up with a strategy right now? So yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the video, but I hope this has been helpful. I mean, what it really comes down to is loving yourself. Like you can't be in a healthy attached relationship with another person if you don't love yourself. So I guess that really is like my last piece of major advice for this theme, is that all these attachment issues, you know, they kind of boil down to the fact that for whatever reason we have become conditioned or conditioned ourselves or convinced ourselves or someone else talked us into it, but we think that we are a person of low worth or unworthy of love because we couldn't get these early needs met. And now we're carrying that pattern forward. So we still, it's embedded in our worldview. It's embedded in the way that we see the world and other people, that it's implicit that no matter what we do, our needs will not get met. And so that this pattern is inexhaustible. You know, it's just going to repeat infinitely. You have to recognize that if you really love and respect yourself, first of all, you can walk away from all the bullshit. Like, you don't have to be in a codependent relationship with a narcissist. You don't have to be abused. You don't have to stay in that pattern because you know in your heart that you would be okay alone. You'd be okay without it. You don't need it. Right? So once you start to recognize that you don't need this specific person to meet that need that you have, or you don't need this kind of relationship to get your needs met, when you can start respecting yourself enough to just fucking walk away from that, that's when things start to change. That's when you're going to find that person who actually cares, right? That's when you're going to find that person who's actually working on this with you through the relationship, instead of acting out that unconscious pattern, that human magnet syndrome, that, you know, different face, same person. So it all comes down to self-love. You got to figure out a way to love yourself. And if you love yourself enough, you won't put up with bad relationships, and you will see that if you really love yourself, you would be out there fostering healthy, attached, loving relationships where your needs can get met. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys tomorrow for day 29. Bye.